My sister called me pathetic and jobless. In front of everyone, then Dad laughed and said, "She's right." So I smiled and left. This morning, they're begging me to come back. They say everyone has a breaking point. Mine didn't come with screaming. No plates were thrown, no fists slammed on tables. Just a single sentence from my sister, followed by a laugh from my father, and the soft, almost imperceptible sound of my chair sliding back as I stood and walked out of their lives. The thing is, I didn't even feel angry in the moment. I felt free. It started at my parents' place, an unassuming Saturday night dinner with all the usual suspects: Mom fussing over the roast, Dad glued to his phone, my brother Mike talking about his third house renovation like it was a divine calling, and Lindsay, my older sister, the self-appointed queen of our family, always ready to issue some decree about how everyone else was falling short. And then there was me. Jonah. The jobless one. The lost cause. The quiet guy who everyone assumed just never figured life out. I'd learned long ago that the less I said, the more they filled in the blanks. I let them. Because the truth was mine, and I wasn't ready to share it. The night started like any other. Lindsay arrived late and loud, wearing one of those designer blouses that practically screamed, "I make 6 figures and need you to know." She was holding court within 10 minutes, talking about clients' stocks, a new car she was thinking of buying but definitely already had. I nodded when it felt polite, sipped my wine, watched the seconds tick by on the kitchen clock like I always did. Until she turned to me with a smirk that told me this wasn't going to be one of those nights I could just float through. "So, Jonah," she said, raising her glass just slightly. "Still jobless, or have you finally started selling your organs on the black market?" The table erupted in laughter. Everyone except me. I looked at her, really looked, and then my eyes met Dad's. He wasn't even pretending to disapprove. In fact, he chuckled, shook his head, and said, "She's right, you know. You've got to do something with your life. You're not 20 anymore." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just smiled. A simple, quiet smile. Then I stood up, pushed in my chair, and said, "You're right." And I left. No yelling. No speech. Just a soft, final click as the door shut behind me. What they didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that less than 48 hours earlier, I had signed the acquisition papers for my tech company. A company no one in my family even knew existed. One I had spent 5 years building from my cramped apartment, while they talked over me at dinners and whispered that I'd never amount to much. We had just been acquired by a major firm. The final number? $46 million. That's why I smiled. Because I wasn't jobless. I was retired. And the best part? That was only the beginning. The next morning felt like waking up in a different universe. Sunlight was pouring into my apartment, and for once, it didn't feel cold. It didn't feel like the kind of light you notice only because you've got nothing else going on. It felt warm. Like a spotlight before a curtain call. I was still in sweatpants, barefoot on the hardwood, sipping coffee when the first notification buzzed on my phone. Breaking, Eventech acquired in landmark deal, founder remains anonymous. Eventech. My baby. My 5-year-long obsession. A cybersecurity company I started in my bedroom with second-hand monitors, 2 whiteboards, and a lot of late-night ramen-fueled coding sessions. I'd been intentional about staying behind the curtain, using a pseudonym for press releases, letting my CTO take the media spotlight. Until now. I posted one thing on LinkedIn. Just one. 5 years of work. One deal. Thank you to everyone who believed in the vision. Proud to finally say I was the founder of Eventech. Not dramatic. Not flashy. But my name was there, Jonah Reese. And within minutes, the post caught fire. Former coworkers I hadn't heard from in years messaged me like we were long-lost soulmates. Recruiters. Journalists. Investors. All knocking. But what really made me pause was the group text from my family, titled Fam. It started with Lindsay. Lindsay. Jonah? Are you serious? You built Evren? Then Mom chimed in. Mom. Sweetheart, we saw the news. Why didn't you tell us? Come over. Let's celebrate. I didn't reply. The text escalated quickly. Dad, you should have said something. I'm proud of you, son. Lindsay again. I feel terrible about last night. I was just joking, you know that. We all were. You're amazing. Amazing. 2 syllables they never used with me in 30 years. By 11 a.m., the calls began. First Lindsay. Then Mom. Then Dad. I let them ring. I was too busy finalizing the wire transfer from the acquisition. The number made my heart race even now. $34 million after taxes. Already sitting in a new account with my name at the top, not theirs. And I wasn't planning to share. Not this time. I walked out to my balcony, coffee in one hand, my phone buzzing like a dying mosquito in the other. I watched the skyline and thought, they laughed at me last night. Laughed. Called me pathetic. Told me I was wasting my life. Now? They wanted in. And they were about to find out that this time, the doormat doesn't open the door. I spent the rest of that day watching the tides shift. My inbox filled up with, "So proud of you." Messages from people who hadn't invited me to weddings, birthdays, or even a casual lunch in years. Family, friends, cousins, my old high school teachers, suddenly everyone remembered me. Apparently, all it takes to become visible in your own story is millions in the bank and your name in a press release. But the real show began that evening. Lindsay called 8 times. I ignored them all. By the 9th, she left a voicemail. Hey, Jonah. Okay, I know things got a little out of hand last night. I was teasing. You know how I am. We love you. We're just so proud of you, and we thought maybe we could get together again soon, like maybe this weekend. I'll cook. Lindsay hadn't cooked since she'd burned water during a cleanse in college. Then Dad texted. I know we've had our differences, but I'd really like to talk. We should have been more supportive. We were surprised. Let's talk, okay? Surprised. Right. It wasn't just that they dismissed me, it was that they genuinely believed the version of me they'd invented. The loser. The couch warmer. The quiet one who had potential, but never lived up to it. And I'd let them. But now, I wasn't just rich. I was something far rarer in a family like ours, respected. So I made a plan. I texted back. Sure. Let's do dinner Friday night. My treat. I'll send a car. No emojis. No emotion. Just bait. And they took it. Fast. Mom. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so glad we can have a proper celebration. Lindsay. Amazing. Should I dress up? Are we doing something fancy? I smiled at the screen. Oh, they had no idea. Because I wasn't taking them to some steakhouse or Italian bistro like they were probably expecting. I had reserved the entire rooftop of a private dining club downtown, velvet everything, skyline views, wine that costs more than my first car. A place that had a wait list unless you had a name. And now, for the first time, I did. But the real twist? They weren't coming for a celebration. They were coming for a reckoning. Friday came with a crisp bite in the air, the kind of weather that made the city feel a little more cinematic. I watched the black car pull up to my parents' house from the comfort of the rooftop dining lounge. The host had been briefed: seat them, pour the wine, and make them wait. Let them stew. They arrived dressed like they were auditioning for a family reunion at the country club. Dad wore a blazer he hadn't dusted off since Lindsay's first engagement dinner. Mom had pearls on, real ones, probably dragged out from a drawer just to match the fantasy she'd already built in her head, that her forgotten son had become someone worth bragging about. And Lindsay? She was in full Showtime mode. Hair curled, smile rehearsed, voice sugar-sweet. I could picture her walking in like the prodigal sister who'd always believed in me, ready to rewrite the last decade with a single toast. I waited 5 minutes. Then 10. Then I walked in. I could feel it before I saw it, that collective inhale. The stunned silence. I was wearing a tailored navy suit, nothing flashy, just sharp. Clean. The kind of thing you wear when you're not trying to impress people, because you already own the room. Lindsay stood up like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to hug me or applaud. Jonah, she said, breathless. You look incredible. Thanks, I replied, shaking her hand instead of hugging her. Figured I should try dressing the part. You know, pathetic and jobless. The smile slid off her face just slightly. Just enough to make my point. I turned to Dad. Nice to see you again. Thanks for the motivational speech last week. He cleared his throat. Jonah, listen, about that night. It was truthful, I said, cutting him off. It was the most honest thing anyone said to me in this family in years. I appreciated the clarity. Silence again. The waiter came to take orders. No one spoke for a few seconds, until Mom finally attempted levity. Well, she said with forced cheer, this place is beautiful. How did you even manage to get a reservation? I took a sip of my drink and smiled. I own part of the building now. That shut her up. Throughout dinner, I let them talk. I let them fawn and flatter and grovel in their own ways. Lindsay laughed too loudly at my jokes. Dad asked about the tech world, like he hadn't once told me I'd be better off stocking shelves. Mom tried weaving in memories, bedtime stories, home-cooked meals, anything to make me forget how easily she looked away last weekend. And I nodded. I played the polite son, the forgiving brother. Until dessert came. I stood, lifted my glass, and looked directly at Lindsay. You know, I said, last week you called me pathetic and jobless in front of everyone. And Dad, you laughed and agreed. And the worst part? None of you even flinched when I left. Their eyes dropped. I let the silence sit for a moment. But I'm grateful. Because that moment gave me permission to stop pretending I ever needed your approval. I turned to Dad. You always said success was about legacy. So here's mine. I built something alone. No handouts. No shortcuts. While you mocked, I worked. Then to Lindsay. And you love to win. But you only know how to compete with people beneath you. That's why I was useful to you. As long as I was failing, you got to be the star. Her face was pale now. And Mom, I looked at her gently. I waited a long time for you to speak up for me. You never did. The table was quiet. The wind moved softly through the rooftop, brushing against the hanging lights above us. So, I said, setting my glass down, this dinner was to say thank you. Because now, I see everything clearly. Lindsay swallowed. So, what happens now? I smiled. Now? I go on with my life. You go on with yours. Separately. And just like that, I walked away. No drama. No shouting. Just the cold echo of their silence behind me. The silence after that dinner was the most beautiful sound I'd ever known. No more calls. No more texts. Just the absence of noise, like they were all too stunned to process what had happened. And I savored it. For 3 days I let them sit in it. Then I sent a single message to our old family group chat. The bank account I created years ago to help Mom with medical expenses? I'm closing it. I'll be donating the balance elsewhere. That stirred the hornet's nest. Lindsay called twice within an hour. Then Mom. Then even Mike, the brother who never involved himself in anything, suddenly very concerned. My father left me a voicemail. Voice strained, pride cracking around the edges. You're going too far, Jonah. This isn't how family works. I didn't respond. Because this was exactly how they taught me family works: conditional love, silence in the face of cruelty, and clapping only when you win on their terms. Well, I'd won. And now, I was rewriting the terms. It started with a headline. I paid for a feature in a prominent business magazine, the kind of glossy profile my father used to frame on his office wall when one of his golf buddies got mentioned. The headline read, Meet Jonah Reese, the quiet genius behind Eventech's billion-dollar security breakthrough. A full spread. Photos. Quotes. Even a mention of how I built the company without a support system. Just grit, late nights, and an unwavering belief in the product. There was a section called The Cost of Silence. I'd asked the journalist to include this quote. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to believe in you are the very first to disappear. But that's okay. When you stop needing applause, you start building legacies. That line? It did the damage I hoped it would. Because by noon, my mother had sent a paragraph-long text asking why I'd chosen to paint the family that way. Lindsay emailed me, actual email, like it was a business inquiry, asking if we could clear the air before people got the wrong idea. I didn't answer either. Instead, I shared the article to my socials with one sentence. This one's for the people who were always too busy looking at their phones to see what I was building. That was for Dad. And the likes rolled in. Their silence hadn't lasted. But now their voices had no weight. They didn't call this time. They came. It was a Sunday afternoon when I heard the knock. Slow, uncertain. I opened the door just far enough to see them, Mom, eyes red-rimmed. Dad, stiff as ever. Lindsay, in sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. We just want to talk, Mom said. I looked at them for a long moment. Then stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind me. No need, I said quietly. Everything that needed to be said was said last week. Lindsay's voice cracked. We didn't mean to hurt you. I cut her off. But you did. Their faces fell. And before they could recover, I added, You taught me my worth by never seeing it. And I'm finally okay with that. Then I turned, walked back inside, and locked the door behind me. No anger. No tears. Just closure. It happened a week later, a phone call I didn't expect. Not from my family, but from the producer of a well-known finance podcast. One of those top-ranking shows that mixes personal stories with business success. They'd read the magazine article and wanted me on the show. People love stories like yours, the producer said. Underdog. Self-made. Quiet revenge. But more than that, your silence makes them curious. Everyone wants to know who you really are. At first, I said no. But later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the moments when I could have spoken up and didn't. All the family dinners where I let the digs slide, smiled through the humiliation, and laughed it off like it didn't matter. Maybe it was time people actually heard the version of events that never made it into the photo albums. So I said yes. The interview went live 3 days later. It wasn't bitter. I didn't name names. But I told the truth, how I grew up being dismissed, overlooked, treated like a disappointment. How my own father laughed at me when I needed him most. How my sister mocked me in front of a room full of people, and I walked away, and built a future they never saw coming. The episode went viral. Not for the tech insights. Not for the business tips. But for the emotional honesty. And that's when everything changed. Lindsay's company reached out to me. Apparently, clients had been calling. Investors had concerns. Her firm didn't like that their star consultant had become part of a cautionary tale. The lines between fiction and reality blur fast when your family is on everyone's earbuds during their morning commute. She emailed me again, this time without any fluff. Jonah, I'm begging you. Please take the episode down. You're ruining my career. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then typed back. No. I'm just telling my story. Funny how that feels like ruin to you. I never got a reply. A few days later, I found out Dad had been asked to step down from the board of a charity he chaired for a decade. Something about incompatibility with the values of the organization. Apparently donors don't love hearing their chair once mocked his son for being jobless, especially when that son now had a platform 10 times the charity's reach. They called again. Of course they did. This time, it wasn't to apologize. It was to beg me to stop. But I wasn't shouting. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I was just finally telling the truth, and watching what happened when people started listening. They say revenge is best served cold, but I always thought that was a bit simplistic. Cold doesn't sting. Cold can be numbing. What I was serving them wasn't just cold, it was calculated. Measured. designed to linger. After the podcast fallout, my inbox became a floodplain of requests. Invitations. Interviews. Panels. Book offers. Everyone wanted to hear more from the man who'd turned family humiliation into empire. But one email stood out. It was from Bradley and Carson, the real estate firm my father had worked with for over 20 years. The same firm where he used to name-drop Lindsay and Mike as his legacy. They wanted me to speak at their annual client summit. The one my dad used to headline. I said yes. When I arrived at the venue, the banner outside said, Keynote speaker, Jonah Reese, founder of Evren Tech, redefining resilience. Inside I saw them. Front row. Dad, stone-faced. Mom beside him, looking brittle and aged in a way I hadn't noticed before. And Lindsay, trying to pretend she wasn't shrinking in her seat. I walked onto that stage with a calm I didn't recognize. The speech wasn't about them. Not directly. But every sentence was a mirror. I spoke about invisible labor. About what it means to build in silence. To be underestimated by the people closest to you, and to choose not to fight back, not out of weakness, but patience. I talked about how legacy isn't inherited, it's earned. How the people who doubt you early are often the ones who will later rewrite history to say they believed in you all along. And then I said this. Some of the most dangerous wounds aren't the ones that bleed. They're the ones inflicted with smiles at dinner tables. With laughter that says you'll never be enough. And if you've ever been in that seat, the one at the edge of the family photo, the one who gets cropped out, remember this, you don't have to fight to be in the frame. Sometimes the smartest move is to build your own picture. One they'll beg to be part of later. I ended with a nod. The room erupted. Standing ovation. Except for 3 people. Afterward, I walked through the lobby. My father caught up with me, put a hand on my arm. Jonah, he said quietly, I didn't realize how much we hurt you. I turned and looked him in the eye for the first time in a long time. I don't think you did, I said. But now you do. He swallowed. Can we fix this? I looked past him to where Lindsay stood, arms folded, lips pressed tight. And my mother, staring down at her shoes like they might offer a way back. No, I said. You can't fix what you refused to see when it mattered. And I meant it. Because the final move wasn't the money. It wasn't the fame. It wasn't even the exposure. It was freedom. I wasn't trying to punish them anymore. I was making it clear, they didn't get to come with me. They built the house of mirrors, full of praise only when convenient and love only when earned. I had spent years clawing for a place inside it. Now, I was burning it down, politely, quietly, and with complete peace. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't change my email. I just stopped answering. There was no final fight, no dramatic confrontation. Just space, wide, clean, and permanent. And in that silence, I finally heard myself. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I wasn't the quiet disappointment. I was the man who left the table and built his own. And now? I choose who gets a seat.